Describe how you first met.
It was in Colombia.
Bogota.
This is not Bogota, even though Mr. and Mrs. Smith try to convince you that all of Colombia is jungles and narco states. This is Bogota, a metropolis rich in wonderful urban art. This is not Villa Gesell. This is the German Andean fantasy of X-Men First Class. This is Villa Gesell, a coastal city with little glamour. This is not San Jose, Costa Rica. In fact, San Jose doesn't even have a beach. This is Seville, except for the small detail that there are bulls running through the streets, which is a tradition from Pamplona, and the devout Spanish populace is burning the statues from the processions for some reason. I guess we really are satanic. Damn it, Tom Cruise, the most pathetic thing is that you did this twice. No wonder Penelope Cruz left you. This is Gus from Breaking Bad. He is brilliantly played by Giancarlo Esposito, an incredible actor who was born in Denmark and speaks Spanish like shite.
Eladio, el padrote hinchado y grasoso. Hablas de honor, pero no tienes ni una gota.
When the show revealed that his character was originally from Chile, it was the biggest plot twist.
Ya no estás en Chile.
How can this guy be Chilean? My family is part Chilean, and believe me when I say this doesn't sound like someone from Chile. Chileans sound like...
¡Buena, buena, concha tu madre! Es un mito, no hay ni un chileno en esta wea. ¡Excelente!
This, and it's one of the most difficult and complicated dialects of Spanish. Damn, I can barely understand my cousin's son.
Él me salvó del barrio pobre de Santiago. Este hombre me hizo el hombre que soy hoy.
To be fair, it's the hardest accent to imitate, and Breaking Bad is a great show, so we can laugh at this and still enjoy it, just like we enjoy the original Resident Evil 4 with its ganados que nos van a romper a pedazos. Morir es vivir. It's adorable in its own way.
¡Ahí está!
¡Basta, hijo de puta! ¡Bloqueale el paso! Cerebros.
This is Jesse from Emilia Perez, played by Selena Gomez. Although Breaking Bad had a lot of problematic representation of Latin Americans and loved to cover every scene in Mexico with a yellow piss-colored filter, at least it was a pleasure to watch, and it even had its own Colombian remake. Emilia Perez is not a good movie, and Jessie spends most of her time screaming like a banshee in an incomprehensible burst of babbling.
Me cortó la lana, cerró la llave, no funciona ninguna tarjeta, todas mis cuentas están bloqueadas, me quiere robar a mis hijos.
As soon as clips from the movie surfaced, it became the laughingstock of all Spanish-speaking countries. However, although we are used to the mishandling of accents in international films, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. This time, people were genuinely offended, and rightly so.
Hasta me duele la pinche vulva nada más de acordarme de ti.
Break, heart, break. Fail, live or fail. But if you can hear me complaining, I'm neither dead or in jail.
Hello, my dear night host, Je suis Quetzal, and I'm Spanish. Although this video is mostly focused on the exoticization of Latin America in Hollywood cinema, in a way, this includes us Spaniards. There is a lot of debate about what constitutes Latin identity and who does or doesn't fit into it, but for the purposes of this video, which deals with the North American-centric version of the world, we all fall into the same artificial and poisonous mishmash of what they understand as Latinx. But since this is a channel where I like to touch on the fundamentals of everything before talking about Emilia Perez, let's talk about the origin of this film, that is, France, a country where I lived for a year in its capital and I know like the back of my hand. There, in Paris, along the Seine, an old train station has been turned into one of the most interesting museums in the country, the Musée d'Orsay, where we can enjoy a wide gallery of art ranging from the late 18th century to the early 20th century, coinciding with the period of French colonial expansion, from the Napoleonic campaigns to World War I. The best part of the museum, of course, focuses on the Impressionist and later movements, but the ground floor is an exhibition of paintings representing distant and exotic cultures. This movement is called Orientalism, and it was extremely popular in colonialist Europe, especially France and the UK. Its origin, like almost everything best and worst in Europe, can be found in Germany, specifically in Romanticism. In the year 1800, in a letter to the great poet Goethe, the anthropologist Wilhelm von Humboldt described Catalonia as follows. The charms of Catalonia, these wooded mountains that alternate pleasantly with fertile valleys, the careful and meticulous agriculture of the country, the cleanliness, the very elegance of the towns and farmhouses around the village, which breathe happiness and well-being. Yes, this is my voice for him, okay? So, about climbing Montserrat, he wrote with his very refined pen. When I was barely ascending the path that leads to the convent and that winds slightly over the rocky slopes, the bells rang even before I noticed. I thought I had before me your devout pilgrim. His descriptions are precise, beautiful, and detailed, until he created in Goethe's mind a sort of Parnassus. And from there, the Romantics began to idealize Catalonia as a land of deep spirituality and mystical revelation. And hey, thank you very much. It's true that we are awesome and we have very woke virgins, but the material reality is that we were poor people and not exactly happy. But all these idealized tales were a fundamental part of Romantic ideology, reclaiming the popular culture of each region, remembering its traditions, and turning them into a fundamental part of identity. In other words, the basis of what would later be considered nationalism, an idea that, as we well know, the Germans ended up taking to a horrible extreme. If Spain, Italy, or Greece were the places that the Germans romanticized at the time, soon all of Europe would be enjoying the exploitation of its foreign colonies, and the 19th century was the peak of this Orientalist aesthetic. Paintings of exotic lands began to represent the Middle East, India, or North Africa. Spain also had its Orientalist current, represented by painters like Fortuny, but curiously, they didn't paint America or the Philippines, but rather imitated the style of Africa that the French were already doing. In any case, on the surface, this Orientalism is well-meaning. Other cultures were beautified, and although there were no shortage of violent scenes, they were always portrayed with exquisite exoticization. But let's not be mistaken. Regardless of the artist's intention, all of this was colonialist propaganda, the aestheticization of the unknown, the myth of the novel savage, the invitations to adventures in distant lands. This would inspire famous adventure novels like those of Jules Verne, Emilio Sargari, or Robert Louis Stevenson, magnificent tales of Western heroes visiting strange places and discovering fascinating cultures. This line can be traced to this day with James Bond, Indiana Jones, and even Lara Croft, whose last adventure had her dressed in a lot of Inca cultural appropriation. The Palestinian literary theorist Edward Said, in addition to having excellent cheekbones and a very neat nose, wrote one of the books that best defined and conceptualized Orientalism. Its content is extensive and profound, too much for this video, but let's try to define it in broad strokes. Orientalism is part of colonialist ideology, a way of defining the otherness of cultures, of creating separations and borders that hierarchize Western cultures above the rest. Europe and North America infantilize other cultures through their artistic and cultural representation, and even seemingly benign representations tacitly justified colonialist ideology. Orientalism can be described and analyzed as a collective institution that relates to the Orient, a relationship that consists of making statements about it, adopting positions toward it, describing it, teaching it, colonizing it, and deciding about it. In short, Orientalism is a Western style for dominating, restructuring, and having authority over the Orient. Okay, enough with the books, right? Do you feel smarter now? I hope so. Do you see where I'm going with this? Exactly. Indiana Jones is racist. Corto Maltese is racist. Take all of your Tintin comics and burn them. Purge yourself of all colonial influences. Your childhood is shit. Your parents were irresponsible, and that's why you are now to blame for all the universal misfortune. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating. After all, adventures in mystified exotic lands awaken in my child self a sincere interest that has led me to try to understand and respect them as an adult. But it's fine, we can all recognize that there's a Eurocentric bias almost everywhere without having to burn around the world in 8 days, a fury awakening for many. That Willy Fogg was quite a gentleman. But then there's the complete dark version of Orientalism, which is when the other culture is unequivocally represented as savage and hostile. And in this sense, one of the areas most harmed by negative stereotypes is Latin America, the place that the United States treats as their backyard. EMILIA Pérez, a French film that is being widely awarded in the United States, is one of the most flagrant examples of the misrepresentation of Mexico in recent years. And the worst part is, they don't seem to realize it, giving it awards left and right, even though the film is, at best, a daring musical with a good choreography and, at worst, a catastrophe that managed to be both transphobic and racist at the same time. Yes! I did not want to watch EMILIA Pérez seriously. A French film set in Mexico, starring actresses who aren't Mexicans because, according to the casting director, there wasn't enough talent among the 128 million people in the country. But when I found out that my colleague Jessie Gender was working on a video about the film, I ended up talking to her about how strange Selena Gomez sounds, and in the end, I did a small collaboration in her video talking about how unconvincing the film's dialogue is. Anyway, what's EMILIA Pérez about? I think you already know, but I'll summarize it for you. Rita is a lawyer played by Zoe Saldana, who first convinces the judge that her probably guilty client is innocent. Of course, she feels a little guilty and even sings a song, but that's just life in Mexico, folks. Tough, very tough, but they love soccer and enchiladas. Rita gets a notification from someone mysterious, whom she meets through the traditional express kidnapping in the middle of the street. This is Manitas, which translates to little hands, more a nickname than a name, played by Carla Sofia Gascon with a suspiciously dark layer of makeup. It turns out that throughout her life, Manitas knew she was a woman, feels bad about all the patriarchal violence she's inflicted on farming families in the drug trade, and has decided that there's no better idea than faking her own death and returning after gender-affirming surgery. We get an absolutely surreal musical number about vaginoplasty, and bam! Goodbye villain, hello Emilia Perez, a kind-hearted trans woman with a new vagina trying to start a new life. Frankly, all of this is a shame because I like the idea of a mafia film starring a trans woman. However, this film's version of transitioning is kinda childish and disrespectful. The change and readjustment of gender roles is a tough process that involves facing a lot of social rejection, but in the film, it's treated like some kind of mystical resurrection. Changing the body changes the soul, changing the soul changes society, Rita philosophically ponders, and I doubt she's right. From there, with a convenient 4-year time gap, Emilia Perez appears divine, beautiful, and redeemed from her evil and dark complexion. That's it. From bloody drug trafficking to philanthropy by the magic of the scalpel. From the ugly duckling to the swan, from man to woman, from penis to vagina. This might have seemed very progressive 25 years ago, but the idea that a trans person is completely transformed through surgery into someone essentially different doesn't really help anyone in this day and age. Every trans people I've seen transition have improved their self-esteem, but they're still the same people I knew before their transitions. They are not miraculous creatures of medical science, and many don't even want to go through all the surgeries so cheerfully assigned to Emilia Perez, because being trans doesn't necessarily involve a scalpel. But hey, the whole transmedicalist debate is very complicated, so let's move on with our story. Plus, I feel like Jessie Gender covered this fantastically in her video, and it's not my place to talk about trans issues too much. Emilia Perez sets up a philanthropic association to find all the people disappeared by the cartel violence in Mexico. The film received a lot of attention when the song El Mal won the Golden Globe for the Best Original Song, and to be fair, if there's anything salvageable in this film, it's here. The song has rhythm, Zoe Saldana moves like a goddess, and the direction is sharp and original. The lyrics talk about how the charity gala is full of corrupt people who have benefited from crime, while Rita promises that they'll pay, like a vedette for vendetta. All of that is fine, but then nothing happens. The corrupt clear their consciousness by donating to Emilia Perez Association, and that's that. They don't appear in the film again. I'm getting bored, so let's speed this up. Okay, so Emilia Perez faked her own death and left her wife and kids. It turns out she poses as a cousin of her past self and sets them up in a mansion. Jessie, the widow in question, is played by Selena Gomez, and her freaking vulva hurts when she tries to pronounce Spanish.
Brincale la pared, querida. Extinguiré mi sed. Bienvenida.
Everything goes well for a while in this telenovela setup, until Jessie falls in love with another bad boy and tells Emilia she's going to marry him and take the kids. Things escalated and Jessie gets cut off.
Elle a coupé ma lame, fermé la clé, aucun carnet fonctionnait. Elle veut voler mes enfants.
Me cortó la lana, cerró la llave. No funciona ninguna tarjeta. Todas mis cuentas están bloqueadas. Me quiere robar a mis hijos.
She tries to get revenge. Emilia Perez gets kidnapped, there's a shootout, she discovers Emilia Perez was her past husband, misgenders her, they all get in a car, Jessie screeches some more, fires some shot, they cross over road, and everyone dies except Rita. Boom! Thanks! songs. End of the movie. Standing ovation at Cannes. Golden Globes. 13 Oscar nomination. A trans woman who gave her life to redeem herself from her patriarchal past deceived her wife by faking her own death and ended up exploding in a car. But it's a shame because she was basically going to solve all of Mexico's violence, that patriarchal state defined solely by crime, misogyny, and sombreros.
¿Qué tanto tuviste que estudiar México para poder?
No, pas tant que ça.
No lo estudié tanto.
Pas tant que ça, c'est-à-dire que ce que j'avais à comprendre, je le savais.
Lo que tenía que entender ya lo sabía un poco.
And then there is the way it all sounds. And as a Spanish speaker, I did this little segment on Jessie Jander's long video, which she has allowed me to just copy and paste. Credits go to her for the editing. You can skip this section if you've already seen it in her video. I am from Spain, with studies in Spanish philology and a lot of love for the different types of Spanish spoken across the globe. In order to be sure I didn't get anything wrong, I consulted with my Mexican friend Eddie, who has helped me to properly identify the problems in the different dialects and idioms used throughout the movie. This film is an idiomatic disaster. It takes no expert to figure that out. The clips of the out-of-place accents are everywhere. However, the problems go beyond misplaced acting. From its very inception, Emilia Pérez is a film that doesn't seem to understand the subtleties of the Spanish language, and it was no surprise to me to see the 3 credited screenwriters are French. It's clear they are probably quite fluent in the language, but it seems like this was never reviewed by an actual linguist, since the expressions and dialects slipped in and out constantly. Eddie, who has been helping me with the script, has this to say.
Emilia Perez has a couple of scenes that must be underlined. First, the director said he didn't investigate Mexico truly before making this movie, while the casting director said there were no actresses in Mexico good enough for this fucking script. Mexico is a country with a population of 128.5 million people. I just don't buy it. And when the screenwriters wrote the script in Spanish without really dominating the Mexican dialect, they simply fuck it up. They mix it in expressions that are never used in my fucking country. For example, Emilia uses a very odd expression to ask for a gender reassignment surgery. We need to find a good place to reset.
Habrá que buscar un lugar seguro para el reseteo.
Para el reseteo, which it's in fact a poor translation of the French expression réinitialiser, and sounds very off for a Mexican character, or any Spanish-speaking person for that matter. Finally, the mistakes are not bounded only to the French language. In the song Bienvenida, she constantly used the word bienvenida in phrases like me ocupé de todos, bienvenida.
Me ocupé de todo, bienvenida.
As a terrible way to translate you are welcome. So, me duele la pinche vulva when I remember this movie.
Even though there are many examples of these kinds of mistakes, I think it's better to just explain it with how it would feel in English. Imagine casting Hugh Grant to play an American cowboy that constantly goes yee-haw and says "me daddy," and then suddenly he goes, "Oh blimey, this is all bollocks, my dear boy," in a very posh British accent.
Now, can you do an American accent?
Not after my one experience doing it. I did it for a TV thing, and for some reason it came out incredibly low and incredibly slow.
This is how it feels to watch Emilia Pérez as a Spanish-speaking person. Accents and expressions from other dialects slip into the film constantly, making it incredibly distracting and unintentionally funny. None of the 3 main actresses can deliver a believable accent. Zoe Saldana is probably the most believable of the 3. She does not exactly sound Mexican, but at least she is mostly consistent in her speech throughout the film. Carla Sofia Gascon doesn't fare as well as the titular character. She is from Madrid and her accent is constantly slipping, her Mexican affections feel very forced, and all her lines in English are delivered with a very clear Spanish accent.
No, because you have something special, something different.
And Carla's constant pendulating from one accent to the other in the span of a few sentences takes me out of the movie. And finally, there is Selena Gomez, who plays one of the most annoying characters ever put to screen. "My vulva fucking hurts when I remember you" is not exactly the most dignified line to give an actress, but having her say it in that homunculi of an accent makes it the funniest moment in her whole career.
Hasta me duele la pinche vulva nada más de acordarme de ti.
This is on par with Tommy Wiseau's accent in his seminal masterpiece of rubbish, The Room.
I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
Giving her a North American background doesn't solve this. Nobody who has been living in Mexico for years could speak like this. She is barely comprehensible. If I had watched this film without subtitles, I wouldn't have understood half of the lyrics in her very dreadful song. Is Emilia Perez's use of language racist or offensive? Well, given the rest of the film is far more problematic in its representation of Mexico as a stereotypical narco state, the linguistic failure is just the cherry on top. Emilia Perez reflects the Mexican spirit in the same way a mass-produced plastic-wrapped supermarket taco does. It is, at its worst, a completely offensive representation of Mexican culture and dialogue, and, at its best, an endless source of memes that will be laughed at and parodied for years to come. But where does Hollywood's fascination with Latin America, especially Mexico, come from? Well, like all the bad things that have happened in that country, it's related to Ronald Reagan, though it started with Richard Nixon. The relationship between the United States and Latin America has never been exactly pleasant, and all the victims of the dictatorships the CIA installed across the continent can attest to that. However, until the 1980s, the villains in Hollywood films and Western media in general were clearly defined. The Soviet bloc played the role of antagonist in almost every action film of the time, from Rambo 3 with Sylvester Stallone to Rocky 4 with Sylvester Stallone. On screen, images of Arnold Schwarzenegger fighting naked in a sauna in red heat, a sequence I love for all the wrong reasons. But during the 80s, the Soviet Union went into sharp decline and a new enemy had to be found. The so-called war on drugs, which began in the 70s, escalated during this time as the fight against narcotics became militarized. The criminalization of marijuana had already been used in the 30s against the Mexican population, and the fact that the border with Mexico was where the cocaine that Wall Street wolves so happily snorted came from made the drug trafficker a popular villain. If in 1988 James Bond was still fighting KGB spies, by 1989, in License to Kill, Timothy Dalton played the agent facing off against Frank Sanchez, a mobster inspired by Pablo Escobar. The 90s were the most fertile ground for the figure of the drug trafficker as public enemy number one, before the Islamic terrorists took the lead during the Bush administration. Robert Rodriguez made most of the films that brought him fame during this decade, and although there is a lot I like about this director, I would say his representation of Mexico does not exactly dilute the stereotype that North Americans have about their neighboring country. Other stereotypes are kinder, but still maintain a certain condescending spirit, like the idea that we're hot and love to party and dance. This applies to Spaniards too, by the way, and frankly, I'd love to be Javier Bardem in Vicky Cristina Barcelona. Do imagine me like Javier Bardem in Vicky Cristina Barcelona.
Well, we'll drink good wine, we'll make love.
Yeah, who exactly is going to make love?
Hopefully the three of us.
Oh my God.
I'll get your bill.
This video is getting long, so let's wrap it up. Is Emilia Perez part of an anti-Latin American conspiracy conjured by the CIA and a French director? No, not really. It's just one of the countless examples where an entire culture is reduced to a caricature by an author from a colonialist country. Emilia Perez isn't more offensive than the endless list of American films where Latin America is a desert with a yellow filter or a jungle with cockatoos. But claiming there was no acting talent in Mexico and giving us Selena Gomez etching pinche vulva instead probably wasn't the best strategy if you wanted to win the sympathy of the audience south of the United States. Obviously, the person tasked with saying the ugly part out loud had to be a Parisian, those good folks who have the great habit of not being hypocrites and spitting directly in your face. Maybe, deep down, we should be grateful for their revolutionary lack of sensitivity, because how badly this film handles its fundamental themes deserves a long conversation. Meanwhile, it seems Hollywood loves Emilia Perez, and they've voted for it everywhere. Even separated from its controversies, I think it's a terrible film, and I suspect these reactions may be a response to Trump's victory. In Hollywood, most are high-profile progressive liberals, and maybe giving attention to a film about a trans woman in a country the president has demonized countless times is their way of protesting against power. A lukewarm, naive way steeped in the condescension of the white savior. Emilia Perez does no favors for the victims of drug trafficking or
Elle a
to
coupé
trans
malade.
people. But
Fermez
I
la
guess
clé.
you're a
Aucun
millionaire
carnet
actor from
fonctionnait.
Beverly Hills.
Elle veut voler mes
Don't
enfants.
the man, but they can do the trick. Meanwhile, Joan Sacre Bleu, the Mexican parody directed by Camila de Aurora, a trans woman, is at almost 2 million reproductions on YouTube. It's a musical set in France, all played by Mexican actors, a biting satire of the racist and transphobic tropes exploited by Emilia Perez. It's a 30-minute musical queer extravaganza with every imaginable French stereotype mixed with a gender-fluid fever dream full of prop rats and the ghost of Marie Antoinette. At the moment, the show doesn't have English subtitles, but given its underground success, it's bound to be more accessible in the future. Camila de Aurora might be a bit overwhelmed at the moment, but I expect to see more of her. Click on the upper right corner for Joan Sacre Bleu. And with this, I prepare my departure into the sunset. I know nothing delights you more than hearing the explanation of a damn Euro trash. So for more of this, remember to donate to my Patreon and hit like and subscribe. It's free. For $1 a month, early videos. For 10, your name in the credits. For 15 or more, private chats with yours truly, so you can explain to me your next vaginoplasty. I also have links to other social media. I use Blue Sky a lot and my DMs are open. Now, let's read the name of my Patreon donors with an offensive, stereotypical Mexican accent. Do please cancel me in the comments. This is Quetzal, buggering off.
Terror como el esqueleto de la señorita Morales, Morichazu, Hortis, Chicharrón Soriano, Mi Way Pumping Master, De Sánchez, Antonio Rosita de Guadalupe, Los Olvidados de Luis Buñuel, Mi Cuate David Plau Torres, Fiction Riders, El Enanito de la Selva Lacandona, Salen, Juanjo Brt, Schubert Suárez, José Feliciano López Rubio, Mi Carnal Javier Vidal, Rogelio Elizondo, Chao Chao Lara, Tomando Guacamoles con David y Jorge, Force of Logic, Marco Arrieta, mi güey, Rubén López. ¿Cómo era la película aquella de Jack Black? Nacho Libre, Uli 22, Diego Sherry viene a casa de mi padre, Borreguito Negro, Anthony BM, Cecilia Serrano Moreno, Oscar Riculi, Haas, Coldo, Rancheras y corridos con Paula Player, Infortunado Señor Pil.
Me queda algún estereotipo mexicano por decir.
Guate, aquí hay tomate, Cari Lop, Speedy González, Piñao, Don Cheto, Chabela Vargas, Emiliano Zapata, Frida Kahlo y su comandante Marcos. Y claro, ¿cómo olvidarse del Chavo del 8? Les encanta, ¿no?